Hello, my name is Lena, and I am 29 years old. I run a small but growing foundation in the heart of the city. We provide housing, food, and emotional support to women who've been abandoned, silenced, or broken by their families. From the outside, this place looks calm. Bright walls, clean hallways, and warm smiles. But what people don't realize is that this building was not built with peace. It was built with pain. Sometimes, people ask me why I chose this path. Why didn't I just enjoy the life I inherited? Why use my fortune to help others instead of living luxuriously? I never know how to answer them in one sentence. So, I usually pause, walk them through the center, and let them see the faces of the women we help. Then, if they're still curious, I say the truth. They tried to kill me for this money, I tell them. My own mother and sister. It still feels strange to say it out loud. Not because it isn't true, but because I survived. I wasn't supposed to. I was meant to be just another headline. Young woman dies in tragic accident. No foul play suspected. But I'm here. Breathing. Fighting. And building something no one can take from me ever again. I often sit in my office by the window, sipping coffee and thinking about the moment everything began to change. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. It started with a birthday I was never allowed to celebrate. A whispered insult. A cold meal when everyone else had cake. People think betrayal begins with violence. But it doesn't. It begins with silence. And for me, the silence began in my own home. Let me tell you everything. Growing up, I always felt like a guest in my own house. Not because we didn't have space. Our home was big, warm, and beautifully built, but because I was never truly seen. My mother, Marcia, was the type of woman who expected perfection from others, but gave none of it herself. She doted endlessly on my younger sister, Mira. To her, Mira was the shining light, the precious one. I was just the other daughter. I still remember my 8th birthday. Mira had gotten a full party the month before. Balloons, music, neighbors, cake, the works. When my birthday came, I got a dry happy birthday at breakfast and a store-bought cupcake. I didn't complain. I just nodded and smiled. I had already learned not to expect more. My father, Robert, was the only one who seemed to notice. He worked long hours running his small but successful real estate company, but he never failed to check on me at night. He'd kneel beside my bed, gently brush my hair back and say, "You deserve more than this, Lena. I see you." Those quiet words were the only reason I held on to hope for years. But Marcia, she was sharp-tongued and dismissive. If I cooked something, she'd say it was tasteless. If I scored well in school, she'd say, "Well, Mira still did better last year." Every achievement was minimized. Every failure magnified. Mira, of course, lapped it all up. She loved being the favorite. She wore it like a crown and treated me like a servant. If I ever protested, Marcia would twist my words and say I was being jealous, difficult, or dramatic. As the years passed, I withdrew into myself. I stopped seeking approval. I stopped hoping they'd notice. Instead, I focused on the only relationship that felt real, my bond with Dad. He saw my efforts, praised my resilience, and shared little jokes with me that no one else understood. I clung to those moments like lifelines. But I didn't know then that he was already sick, and that the distance between us all was about to turn into something much darker. I was 26 when we learned that Dad had cancer. The diagnosis came like a quiet storm, no warning, no time to prepare. Stage 4. Aggressive. The doctors said we had limited months, maybe a year, if we were lucky. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. I still remember the look in his eyes the day he told us. He wasn't afraid. He didn't cry. He only looked tired, like a man who had carried the world for too long and was finally being asked to let go. Marcia's reaction was cold and short. "We'll figure something out." Mira barely looked up from her phone. I stood frozen, the only one truly seeing the man who had held our family together. From that day on, I refused to leave his side. I quit my part-time office job to care for him full-time. I organized his pills, made his meals, and drove him to chemotherapy appointments. I held his hand during painful injections and listened quietly when he just needed someone near. I bathed him when he was too weak to stand and sat beside him at night when the pain wouldn't let him sleep. Marcia and Mira? They couldn't be bothered. My mother treated him like an inconvenience, muttering under her breath about hospital bills and being too young to play nurse. Mira stopped coming downstairs altogether. "It's too depressing," she once said with a shrug. But I didn't care about their absence. In fact, I was grateful. It gave me more quiet moments with Dad, moments I'd never forget. We talked for hours about the life he lived, the regrets he carried, and the things he wished he'd done differently. One night, as I sat beside his bed, he looked at me with a faint smile and said, "You're the only one who stayed, Lena. You've always stayed." I held his hand and whispered, "I always will." What I didn't know then was that he had already made a decision, one that would change my life forever. A few days later, while I was getting his tea, he quietly called his lawyer and rewrote his will. He never told me. He didn't need to. He knew I'd never ask for anything, but he also knew what I deserved. Dad's decline happened faster than anyone expected. Within a few months, he went from walking slowly with a cane to barely moving at all. His voice became a whisper, his body thinner each day, and his eyes, though dimmer, still searched for mine every morning, always with warmth, always with trust. Then, one gray morning, he was gone. I had stepped out of his room for just 10 minutes to get fresh bedsheets. When I returned, his chest was still, and the soft hum of the oxygen machine had quieted. I stood there, frozen, unwilling to accept what was obvious. I dropped the linens and reached for his hand, but it was already cold. I don't remember crying right away. My whole body went numb. The next sound I heard was my mother's voice from downstairs. "Is it done?" No grief, no shock, just those 3 hollow words. The funeral was simple. He had always said he didn't want anything extravagant. No long speeches, no big crowd. Just close family and a few old friends. I organized it all. Marcia and Mira barely showed up on time, dressed in black like it was a formality rather than a farewell. After the burial, a man approached me as I was placing flowers at Dad's grave. "Lena Carter?" he asked gently. "My name is Mr. Daniels. I was your father's lawyer. He asked me to contact you after his passing." I nodded slowly, unsure of what this was about. "We'll need to arrange a formal reading of his will," he said. "He made some recent changes. Your family should be present." I didn't think much of it then. I assumed Dad had left something small, maybe a letter, maybe the house divided equally. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. 2 days later, we sat in the lawyer's office, me, Marcia, and Mira. The air was tense, heavy with unspoken assumptions. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat and began reading. "To my eldest daughter, Lena Carter, I leave my full estate." Marcia gasped. Mira scoffed. "Which includes my residence at Willow Creek, my commercial rental property, and the entirety of my savings and investments, totaling $2.5 million. Marcia slammed her hand on the table. "This is a mistake." But it wasn't. Every document was signed, notarized, and dated, just 3 weeks before his death. I sat there in stunned silence, heart pounding, as the realization hit me. Dad had trusted me enough to give me everything. Marcia's eyes burned with hatred. Myra's mouth twisted into a sneer. And in that moment I knew this wasn't over. The ride home from the lawyer's office was silent. I sat in the back seat of the car, still stunned by what had happened. My father, my only true ally, had left me everything. It should have felt like a blessing, a final act of love. But all I felt was dread. When we arrived back at the house, Marcia exploded. "How could you let this happen?" she shouted, slamming the front door. "You manipulated him. He wasn't in his right mind." I stood in the hallway, holding my coat, my voice steady. "He was fully conscious when he signed everything." The lawyer said it himself. Mira, arms crossed at the top of the staircase, added with a smirk, "You've always been his pet. You must have cried your way into his will." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Their reactions told me everything. They weren't mourning the man we'd lost. They were mourning the money they didn't get. In the following days, things got worse. Marcia and Mira refused to look me in the eye. They'd whisper in corners, fall silent when I walked into the room, and slam doors just loud enough to let me know I wasn't welcome anymore. At night, I could hear them arguing behind closed doors, angry and panicked about finances. I tried to keep my distance, spending most of my time in my room, organizing the paperwork with Mr. Daniels and making quiet plans for the future. I didn't want to fight over what was legally mine. I only wanted peace. But peace, it seemed, was the one thing they would never allow. One afternoon, Mira barged into my room without knocking. "Mom and I talked," she said flatly. "You're going to divide the inheritance. It's only fair." I looked up from the folder in my lap. It was Dad's decision. I didn't ask for this. She rolled her eyes. "So what? You think that makes it okay to keep all of it?" "I'm not discussing this," I said, standing up. "You got everything you ever wanted when he was alive. I got ignored. This is the first thing he's ever truly given to me." She laughed bitterly. "You think you've won, don't you?" And then she walked out, slamming the door behind her. That night, I locked my bedroom door. For the first time, I felt unsafe in my own home. They had lost control, and I had no idea just how far they'd go to get it back. It happened 3 weeks after the will reading. I had been avoiding them, Marcia and Mira, as much as possible. The tension inside the house had reached a dangerous level. Meals were silent. Eye contact was rare. I started double-checking the locks at night, setting up calls with the lawyer more often, and sleeping with the light on. I didn't feel like a daughter anymore. I felt like a target. That morning, I needed to clear my head. I told myself I'd just go out for a walk, pick up a few groceries, and get some fresh air. I wore a sweatshirt, tied my hair back, and left the house quietly, hoping not to wake anyone. The air was cold, and the streets nearly empty. I had just turned the corner near Maple Street when I heard it, a car engine revving. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Then the tires squealed. I looked up. A black car was speeding directly toward me. There was no time to scream. No time to run. Just impact. The hit felt like being crushed by a wall. My body was thrown against the pavement. I remember the blinding pain in my ribs, the ringing in my ears, and the sudden blur of gray sky above. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, silence. Someone shouted. I felt hands on my shoulder. Another voice yelled to call 911. A stranger pressed a jacket under my head. "Stay with us," he said. "You're gonna be okay." I faded in and out of consciousness as the ambulance arrived. My vision was dark around the edges, but I remember one thing clearly. The car didn't stop. It never slowed down. Whoever hit me wanted me dead. In the hospital, I drifted between sleep and pain. The doctors said I had broken ribs, a mild concussion, and severe bruising across my side. I couldn't stand. I couldn't speak for a day. The police came and filed a report. "Probably just a reckless driver," one officer said, jotting notes. But I knew better. I felt it in my bones. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. And it wouldn't be the last. 3 days passed in the hospital. My body ached with every breath. My head throbbed. Bruises ran from my collarbone to my hips. I couldn't sit up without help. The nurses were kind, checking in often, making sure I was eating, cleaning my wounds, and helping me rest. I was alone, but at least I was safe. Not once did Marcia or Mira visit. The hospital had called them. I had heard the nurse speaking gently on the phone. "Yes, your daughter. She's stable, but in rough condition." I waited, expecting something, at least a text, a question, a brief appearance. Nothing. Until the 3rd day. It was early afternoon. My nurse had just finished adjusting my 4 and left the room. I was alone, drowsy, half asleep, when the door creaked open. My heart jumped. It was Marcia. She entered the room quietly, holding a bouquet of white lilies in one hand and a thick brown envelope in the other. Her face was composed, too calm, like someone rehearsing an apology. I couldn't read her expression. "Hello, sweetheart," she said, placing the flowers on the table beside me. "How are you feeling?" I said nothing. My throat felt tight. My body stiffened. She hadn't even called in 3 days, and now here she was with flowers and paper. She sat at the edge of the bed and exhaled deeply, as if this moment was difficult for her. Then, slowly, she opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents. "I know you're in pain," she said gently, "so I'll keep this simple. Sign these. You'll transfer the house and investment accounts to Mira. It's the right thing to do." I blinked, disbelief and rage rising in my chest. "No." Her face changed instantly. Her mask slipped. The coldness I had grown up with returned in a flash. "You ungrateful little girl," she hissed. "We gave you everything. You were nothing before this. You think you deserve all of it." "I won't sign," I said, my voice cracked but firm. "It was Dad's decision." Her eyes narrowed. "Then I'll make you." Before I could press the call button, her hand balled into a fist and swung fast, connecting with the side of my already injured head. Pain exploded through my skull. I cried out, my scream echoing through the hospital floor. Within seconds, the door burst open. A nurse shouted. 2 security guards rushed in and yanked her off me. "What's going on here?" one of them demanded. "She hit me," I gasped, clutching my head. "She was trying to force me to sign something." Marcia tried to recover, putting on a fake expression. "It's just a misunderstanding." I was upset. "Save it," the guard snapped. "You just assaulted a patient." The nurse already had her phone out. "I'm calling the police." Marcia's face drained of color. She started to protest, but one of the guards held her arms behind her back as she kicked and yelled. "You'll regret this, Lena," she screamed as they pulled her toward the hallway. "This isn't over." I closed my eyes, shaking. My body trembled, not from pain this time, but from the truth settling in. My own mother had just hit me in a hospital bed for money, and something deep inside me finally snapped. This time, I wasn't going to be silent. The police arrived within minutes. By the time they entered my hospital room, Marcia was already in custody, handcuffed, flanked by 2 security officers, still shouting about misunderstandings and disrespect. But no one was listening anymore. A female officer gently approached my bedside. "Miss Carter, can you speak with us?" I nodded slowly, pain flaring in my ribs. They took my statement carefully. I told them everything about the documents, the threats, and how she struck me. The nurses and guards backed it up. It was open and shut, physical assault and attempted coercion. She was charged on the spot and taken to the station. But that was just the beginning. The officer's partner stayed behind and asked one more question. "Has anything like this happened recently? Something that seemed off?" That's when I told him about the car. The hit and run. His expression changed. "Do you remember the license plate? The make of the car? Anything at all?" I shook my head weakly. It was too fast. But it didn't feel like an accident. The officer took notes. "We'll look into it. That's serious." I didn't expect anything to come of it. But 3 days later, a detective returned to my hospital room with news that made my blood run cold. They had traced the vehicle, a black sedan, registered under a man with a criminal record for theft and fraud. He had fled the state but was caught crossing into Arizona. When they questioned him about the hit and run, he cracked. He confessed. Said he'd been paid. Paid to hit me. By my mother. And my sister. They had approached him weeks earlier, offered him cash and a clean getaway. All he had to do was make sure I didn't live to collect the inheritance. When the police raided our home with a warrant, they found hidden cash, burner phones, and notes written in Myra's handwriting, detailing times I usually left the house, my routines, and which streets I often walked. They arrested Mira that same night. I was still in bed when I got the call. The officer's voice was calm, but heavy. "Miss Carter," he said, "your sister is in custody. We have more than enough evidence to charge them both with attempted murder and conspiracy." I stared at the wall in silence, tried to breathe, tried to feel something other than betrayal. But there was nothing left except one thought, repeating over and over. They really tried to kill me. For money. The trial began 6 weeks after I was discharged from the hospital. By then, I could walk short distances with a cane. My ribs were still healing, and my body carried the scars of what had happened, not just physically, but emotionally. Still, I was determined to show up in court with my head held high. I wasn't there just to testify. I was there to make sure justice had a face, mine. The courtroom felt sterile, cold, almost like a hospital in its own way. The walls were pale, and the lights harsh. Marcia and Mira sat together on the other side, shackled, dressed in plain beige jumpsuits. There was no remorse in their eyes, just resentment. Mira refused to look at me. Marcia, on the other hand, stared like she still believed she could control the narrative. But she couldn't anymore. The prosecutor did his job with precision. He laid out everything: the physical assault in the hospital, the forged inheritance documents, and most damning of all, the murder plot. The driver's confession, the burner phones, the handwritten notes with my routines. Every ugly truth was exposed under oath. When I was called to the stand, my legs trembled, but my voice didn't. I spoke about my childhood, the silent emotional abuse, the way I had grown up being erased in my own home. I told them about my father, the only person who had ever truly seen me, and how his death had been followed by a betrayal deeper than death itself. Mira cried on the stand, calling it a mistake. Marcia stayed stone-faced. Their lawyer tried to spin it as desperation born from grief. But desperation doesn't hire a hitman. The judge saw it for what it was: planned, malicious, and heartless. In his final remarks, he said, "This wasn't a moment of passion. This was a premeditated attempt to take a life for money." Then he sentenced both Marcia and Mira to 20 years in state prison, no parole for at least 12. He also ordered them to pay $50,000 in restitution for my medical costs and emotional damages. As they were led away, Marcia turned and hissed, "You think you've won, Lena?" I looked at her without blinking. "No," I said. "I survived. And you lost far more than money." It's been a year since the trial ended, and life has slowly started to feel like mine again. I live in the same house my father left me, but it feels different now, safe, warm, and mine. I renovated it not just for comfort, but to remove the shadows they left behind. New paint, new furniture, new beginnings. The rental property my father owned still brings an income, and his savings gave me enough to start something that matters far more than anything they tried to steal. I opened the Robert Carter Foundation 6 months ago. It began with just one office, 2 rooms, and a mission to help women who have been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect them. Women like me. Now the center hums with life. Women come here with stories carved into their skin and hearts, and slowly, they begin to heal. We offer food, shelter, legal support, and something rarer: belief. We believe them, even when no one else ever did. Sometimes people ask me, "Why didn't you just take the money and disappear? Start fresh, somewhere far away?" I tell them the truth, because healing isn't just for me. I needed to turn that pain into something that reached further than the walls of my own survival. One morning, I sat by the large window in my office, sipping tea, when a young woman walked in with bruises under her eyes and trembling hands. I greeted her with a smile and said, "You're safe here now." That moment felt like everything my father would have wanted for me. I miss him every day, but I carry his love in every person this foundation helps. To anyone listening, if they told you that your worth depended on how much you gave, how quiet you stayed, or how small you made yourself, they were wrong. They tried to silence me for money. Instead, I used that money to give others their voices back. This isn't just the ending of their story. It's the beginning of mine. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it touched your heart or made you think, please take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback truly means the world to us and helps more people find stories that matter. Have you ever faced betrayal from the people you trusted most? Or turned your pain into something powerful? We'd love to hear your story. Let's support each other in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true stories of strength, survival, and justice. New videos are released regularly, and we can't wait to share the next one with you. Until then, stay strong and never let anyone silence your worth.